happy to sing alto if you need to. You want soprano? Yeah.
Hello.
My voice is so loud.
I just want to invite people to start to take their seats. We're going to have some formal announcements from the new ambassador of peace for Pax Christi USA, Mary Hannah, in just a moment. But if you can start to come in and take your seats, and then Mary will be up here in just a moment.
It's 8:55. So can I just hear one nice SATB? Yep. Honey good. Yeah, fine good in there. Does somebody need something? I'm gonna look over her shoulder and I'll be fine. Where were we? Oh yeah. You guys. Yes, it is. Yeah, more huddling. We got it. Rick, yes. Hey, Rick.
That's right at the beginning. So that's right after the announcement.
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. If I could have people's attention just for a minute. It's nice to hear everyone talking and interacting, but if I could have your attention for just a second. Do a little bit over a second. So before we get formally started this morning, folks, I know that there were some questions about some disruption that we had during our plenary yesterday, and I just wanted to share with you because I think it's good for people to have information so that they feel safe and they understand what was happening and whatnot. I wanted to share with you some information about the plenary session and the young man who attended and who some of you noticed disrupted some of our speakers. In discussion with the young man, professionals in nonviolent conflict resolution and trauma reduction within our membership came to the determination that he was suffering a mental health crisis. And we attempted to handle the situation in a way that did not escalate the situation or cause harm to the young man. And again, we're Pax Christi, and this is about putting our nonviolence into action and seeing Jesus in those people that he said he was present in. Hotel security staff and some in this room have been working to find a solution that respects the young man's dignity while also assuring that we can proceed with our conference without further interruption. If a situation were to transpire today, we want you to know that we do have a plan in place to help de-escalate any possible situation, and we'll attend to it with the best of all of our tools. The determination was made last night that the young man was in distress, not dangerous to others. But if any danger should present itself, we will stop a session and give you instructions on how to proceed. We share this with you out of a sense that knowing what is going on and that it is being actively addressed in a compassionate, respectful way may alleviate any fear or discomfort that you may feel if such a thing happens as happened last night. I want to thank each of you for your understanding, and I especially want to thank the Meta Peace team for stepping in and helping with our intervention last night, and ask each of you to keep our young guests in your prayers today as well. Thank you, everyone.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all up and ready to go, and it's great to have coffee. I don't know about the rest of you, but that starts my day. If you could take your seats, we're getting ready to start. You'll notice that there are booklets on the table that have the liturgy. It's also going to be projected up on these screens. There's not enough booklets for everybody, so if you don't need one, please share it with someone who does and might have difficulty reading it off the screen. Volunteers are supposed to be passing stuff out as we speak, but I think they're already on the tables. Yeah, so don't worry about looking for the volunteers. There aren't any. You're not missing something obvious. While we're in the plenary space, we're asking folks, out of respect and care for each other, to please wear your masks, unless you're, of course, taking a sip of that all-important coffee. We also have a really wonderful, exciting announcement to make, and I am going to ask Josie Garnon to come up here and share that information with us. It's going to be a great way to start the day.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. May I have Johnny and Charlene come up? Is Charlene around? She was. Charlene, it's okay. Maybe we can. Charlene, please.
Surprise.
My glasses over here. So, proclamation, Montgomery County, Maryland. Whereas Pax Christi began in the United States in 1972 and grounded in the gospel and Catholic social teaching, Pax Christi USA is a membership organization that rejects war, preparation for war, every form of violence and domination, and personal and systemic racism. And whereas Pax Christi works tirelessly for a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world through the efforts of its members and in collaboration with other groups. And whereas Pax Christi USA embraces the anti-racist, multicultural peace and justice movement and does all its work from an anti-racist perspective in the conviction that personal and systemic racism continues to perpetuate deep spiritual and social brokenness and endangers all humanity. And whereas Pax Christi USA is committed to establishing strong, honest, caring relationships, both personal and institutional, across racial lines in order that together they transform structures and cultures of violence and domination. To accomplish this transformation, Pax Christi USA is committed to transforming its organizational structures, policies, practices, and forms of decision-making to include participation of and accountability to people of color. And whereas Pax Christi USA has shown by its actions and good works for the past 50 years that it is a significant asset to the community, providing leadership and funding projects that have greatly benefited the area and its citizens, as well as people around the world. Now, therefore, do I, on behalf of Mark Elric, as County Executive, hereby proclaim Saturday, August 6, 2022, as Pax Christi USA's 50th Anniversary Day in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I urge all residents to recognize the achievements of Pax Christi USA has made to our community and commend the organization for its continuing great work and a bright future. Signed this 6th day of August in the year 2022 by Mark Elrich, County Executive of Montgomery County.
As we prepare to enter into prayer, we meditate on Pequeñas Aclaraciones, text by Miguel Manzano and music by José Olivar. When a poor person has nothing and still gives, when a thirsty person gives us water, when the weak person gives strength to another, it is God who walks along with us. Please stand as you are able. Plenty good room, plenty good room, plenty good room in my Father's kingdom. Plenty good room, plenty good room. So choose your seat and sit down. Don't sit down yet. Plenty good room, plenty good room, plenty good room in my Father's kingdom. Plenty good room, plenty good room. So choose your seat and sit down. I would not be a sinner. I'll tell you the reason why. I'm afraid my Lord might call on me, and I wouldn't be ready to die. Plenty good room, plenty good room, plenty good room in my Father's kingdom. Plenty good room, plenty good room. Don't choose your seat and sit down. Plenty good room, plenty good room, plenty good room in my Father's kingdom. Plenty good room, plenty good room. So choose your seat and sit down. Don't choose your seat and sit down. Don't choose your seat and sit down. Don't choose your seat and sit down. Choose your seat and sit down.
I wish to say that I wrote this prayer, and they said, it says a prayer wrote on the reflection of Pax Christi USA's 50th anniversary. But Cathy Leary, please stand up. Please stand up. All right. It is written on the basis of her weaving. She talked about the weaving in the beginning of the year, of how we would weave all of the things into a weaving. And she has created a weaving that is in the prayer room. So this is the prayer that I wrote, but she's got the weaving. So it is always something we do together. Thank you, Cathy. Your work was the inspiration. God of creation, wonder counselor, we pray over the choice of threads needed to create our tapestry of hope. We must weave through the deep racism in the land that has caused so much pain and suffering for all. We must weave in hope, joy, and peace. Oh my God, give us your spirit of wisdom that will come from deep within our hearts. Let us pull out the awful thread of racism that has shaped our country's agenda since its existence, causing a lack of justice for many. This thread woven throughout all our policies in how we treat impoverished people, how we distribute resources, how we legislate immigration, and how and who we kill. This thread of racism must be removed, for it continues to weaken our national and global tapestry. It allows the coldness of justice to blow through every fabric of our lives. O God of creation, wonder counselor, help us to continue to spin together the right threads that we may weave and a tapestry of peace with hope for all our sisters and brothers. Amen.
In 1999, Pax Christi USA initiated Brothers and Sisters All, a 20-year strategy to transform Pax Christi USA into an anti-racist, multicultural, Catholic peace and justice movement. For a generation now, we have sought to embrace this identity and do all our work from an anti-racist perspective, in the conviction that personal and systemic racism continues to penetrate deep spiritual and social brokenness and endangers creation.
Because racism inflicts violence on people of color, because violence anywhere is an injustice everywhere, and because injustice is a sin against humanity and against the God who creates, redeems, and sanctifies us. Racism is contrary to who we are and are called to be brothers and sisters all.
We have chosen this identity in order to confront the persistent, destructive, personal, and systemic racism that perpetuates violence in our communities and results in deep spiritual and social brokenness. We are confident that a spirituality of nonviolent anti-racism makes our transformative vision a reality.
Empower us, O God. Empower us, O God.
Venerable Pierre Toussaint.
Empower us, O God.
Venerable Henrietta DeLille.
Empower us, O God.
Servant of God, Mother Mary Lang.
Empower us, O God.
Julia Greeley.
Empower us, O God.
Venerable Augustus Tolton.
Empower us, O God.
Sister Thea Bowman.
Empower us, O God.
We pray for the efforts to canonize these 6 African American candidates for sainthood. And we ask their intercession for our church and our community as we plot our next steps on this journey towards becoming an anti-racist Catholic movement for peace and justice, a more complete, authentic witness to the beloved community to which we are called. Amen.
Amen. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. More precious than silver and gold. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. More precious than silver and gold. She is so precious. Oh, wisdom. precious than silver and gold. She's more precious than silver and gold. She's more precious than silver and gold.
Amen.
We're getting serious now. So welcome, everyone. It's so good to see your faces this morning. I'm glad that you all were able to come today. I hope the breakfast was good and nourishing. I hope you have water with you. I hope you have coffee with you. We need to nourish our bodies. We need to nourish our brains also, and that's why we're here. And we need wisdom. We need wisdom from a lot of people who have been around and are giving us so much. They have so much to offer. So welcome, welcome. I want to also recognize that our beloved Bishop John Stowe is here with us this morning. As you know, he is one that accompanies not only in prayer, I get emotional, but it's a very special person who's always reflecting with us, learning with us, gathering with us, breaking bread with us, and that's something that we really appreciate from him. So sending a big hug from here to you. So today we're at day 2. How do you feel? Yes? Everybody feeling good? We're going to continue this journey through the decades of Pax Christi. Can I invite those of you who found your way to Pax Christi USA in the 1990s, and can I ask you to stand? There we go. Applause for all of you. 1990s. Thank you. And how about those of you who joined the first decade of the 2000s? Yes. Very good. We're going to continue recognizing each other, recognizing the relationship that we get with each of you, like all the things that you add when you join this group, when you gather together. You bring your background, you bring your experience, you bring your wisdom. And so that's why we're here. All right. We thank you for your commitment as well. This morning's plenary panel, and I should remove this, is an informal discussion among peers from multiple perspectives, experiences, and engagement with the Pax Christi USA movement as we celebrate our 50th year anniversary. Pretty amazing, 50 years. Whew. It is an intergenerational conversation exploring the arc of the work of peace within Catholic circles, from Pacem in Terris to Fratelli Tutti, with special attention on Pax Christi USA's challenges and contributions. The importance of an intersectional approach that makes explicit linkages between peacemaking, racism, consumerism, ecological justice, and LGBTQ inclusivity. And the future for Pax Christi and the Church around peacemaking for the next 50 years. I'm Roxana Bendezú. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the program director of Pax Christi USA. I'm a descendant of the Quechua peoples of the Andes, and I'm very proud to be here joining this gathering. I'll be moderating this discussion, and hopefully it's going to be an opportunity for the folks who are going to join us to offer their wisdom. So first, I'm going to introduce Cathy Crayton, and I'm going to ask them to start coming to the stage and having a seat, starting from the second there. Cathy Crayton has been a co-founder of a local Pax Christi group, a regional representative for Pax Christi Southern California, and member of Pax Christi USA's National Council. As a council member, Cathy was a collaborator in Pax Christi USA's anti-racism initiative, Brothers and Sisters All, and founding member of the Pax Christi anti-racism team, PCART, in 2000. An anti-racism trainer who has written extensively on the subject. Cathy has served on several committees and boards, including Network, the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, Advisory Group, and the Justice and Peace Commission for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Currently, she is a project specialist at the University of Southern California, where she has worked for the past 29 years. Thank you, Cathy. Well, I feel like this needs no introduction, but Marie Dennis is here with us as well. Marie is a senior advisor to the Secretary General of Pax Christi International and program chair of Pax Christi's Catholic Nonviolence Initiative. She was co-president of Pax Christi International from 2007 to 2019, and is a Pax Christi USA Ambassador of Peace. She's author, co-author, or editor of 7 books, including Choosing Peace, The Catholic Church Returns to Gospel Nonviolence, and Advancing Nonviolence in the Church and the World. She serves on the Vatican's COVID-19 Commission and the steering committee of the Catholic Peacebuilding Network, and is a mother of 6 and a grandmother of 9. And can I get the hands of the grandchildren who are here with us? Yes. Next generations are already being formed here. So happy for them to join. And next, we have Christina Leaño. Christina serves as Associate Director of the Laudato Si movement, a worldwide network of 800+ Catholic organizations and thousands of individuals bringing Pope Francis' Laudato Si into action for climate justice. She brings over 25 years of leadership on social and environmental justice issues, including co-founder of the Filipino-American Coalition for Environmental Solidarity. Christina is a trained meditation teacher and spiritual director, drawing upon 2 decades of contemplative practice, including 3 years in a Catholic Cistercian monastery. Christina is trained in mindfulness-based stress reduction through the University of San Diego Center of Mindfulness, and is a graduate of the Community Dharma Leaders program through Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Woodcare, California. Thank you, Christina, for being with us. Next, we have McKenna. Megan lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and works with peace and justice groups with a concentration on the scriptures, oral traditions, cross-cultural theologies, and storytelling around the world. She leads parish missions and retreats, and is a sought-out speaker with Pax Christi groups worldwide. For the last 4 years, she has primarily worked with First Nations communities in northwestern Canada on peace, restorative justice, reconciliation, and resurrection. She's the author of 52+ books and is currently writing a 3-volume lectionary of commentaries and reflections and a book on forgiveness, reconciliation, restorative justice, making peace, repairing souls and systems, and resurrection with both the First Nation, Indigenous communities, and non-Native groups. Thank you, Megan. And last but certainly not least, a very dear person who, there we go. One other person that we needed to mention, I skipped that, excuse me. Dr. Shannen Dee Williams. Shannen is, Dr. Williams is Associate Professor of History at the University of Dayton, a historian of the African American experience with research and teaching specializations, hard word, in women's, religious, and Black freedom movement. movement history. Williams is the author of Subversive Habits, Black Catholic Nuns in the Long African American Freedom Struggle, published by Duke University Press in May 2022. And it's a book that is for sale downstairs, so you can get it today. Her work has been published in the Journal of African American History, American Catholic Studies, The Washington Post, American Magazine, and National Catholic Reporter. A distinguished lecturer for the Organization of American Historians, Dr. Williams also writes the award-winning column, The Griot's Cross, published by the Catholic News Service. Thank you so much, Shannen, for being with us. Now, last but not least, my colleague and friend, Lauren Bailey, is going to join us as well. Lauren is a national field organizer with Pax Christi USA. She has a background in advocacy and organizing, focused on peace and nonviolence, death penalty abolition, and tenant organizing. She has her bachelor's of social work with minors in gender and diversity studies and peace of social work, and peace and justice studies, and also holds her master of social work with an area of emphasis in community and social justice. Lauren continues her anti-death penalty advocacy by serving on the board of directors for the Journey of Hope. Welcome, everyone. We're gonna arrange our chairs in a minute, and we'll start. And everybody has a mic? Yes. They're on, yes. Yes. Well, thank you everyone for being here. It's all these faces together is quite an amazing thing to do today. This is exactly what we need. How do we get all this analysis, all this wisdom from folks who are usually in different places around the country, and sometimes around the world? So I really want this to be a conversation where folks feel that they could participate, they could build on. And so I'm going to just jump into the questions. And this is, of course, open for folks who would like to participate. For those who have been around for all or at least a good chunk of the time, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the first 50 years of Pax Christi, because that's what we're celebrating. And we really want to hear what are the experiences that you've encountered. What was a major moment of accomplishment, for example, that you remember? Or anything that you would like to share. I know that there's a lot to share from the last 50 years of work as Pax Christi members and leaders.
Maybe I could jump in there. What came to my mind when you asked that question, Roxana, is I'm remembering the quincentenary of the arrival of Columbus in the Americas, and the recognition that in some way Pax Christi USA had to accompany indigenous communities who were marking that anniversary in a very serious way to lift up the injustice of 500 years rather than to somehow celebrate the, quote, discovery. During that year, Pax Christi USA across the country initiated a small group reflection process built around prayer, study, and action that studied the history of the indigenous communities in the Americas and shaped the agenda and the strategy of Pax Christi USA going forward based on reflections across the country on that anniversary of the quincentenary. In many ways, it was the seeds of questions about how Pax Christi USA was going to address the ongoing racism in our society.
Thank you for mentioning that to begin with, especially considering that our Pope are also taking steps to walk towards the acknowledgement that it was obviously a clear mistake to issue the papal bulls that included the doctrine of discovery, and that it was used as a base to legitimize nations such as this.
So I would also, can you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry, it doesn't sound loud to me, okay. I would also echo that, because I was also part of that discussion, part of that small group process that, that studied the quincentenary and learned more about the doctrine of discovery. And yes, it was the seeds, I think, of later on in the decade, in the late 1990s, where we began this Brothers and Sisters All initiative, from which, of course, the Pax Christi anti-racism team was developed. So that was really critical, yes, of course. Thank you for bringing that up, because I almost forgot.
At that time, I was primarily in Central and South America and working with indigenous nations around the world. And out of that, their experience of change in dealing with justice, injustice, and violence was small communities. They call them small base communities that for a period of time at Pax Christi became what Pax Christi was. Small groups that studied the scriptures weekly and worked together for justice and became peacemakers together. That the daily life of Pax Christi, you belong to a group that studied the scriptures, much like they did in Central and South America and with the First Nations still do, and that it was out of that study of the scriptures that you decided what to do in your local group, and then you moved into peace from justice. And that I really feel that Pax Christi has lost a great deal of that structure of small groups I don't know, get a show of hands or whatever, but how many of you are in a small group connected through Pax Christi or in any group at this point that studies the scriptures on a weekly basis for conversion, not information, for conversion, and that together you decide what you're going to do for justice and how that is going to make you a better peacemaker. So that really formed me in the first 15 years of Pax Christi.
Thank you. And I want to just emphasize the work of our national organizer, who is actually doing that, in the process of doing that, of really getting folks to get to know each other, to have their groups in their own communities, and to start gathering, start thinking, start analyzing together. And so I think there are processes that are being put in place, and that's always a journey for all of us, right? There are times that are sometimes the concentration is different, and I know that, and I don't know her personally, but I know Sister Patty put a great effort into understanding racism, and that is important, that is critical. And so it's part of the process, and there's time for that. There's time for learning, and there's time to analyze together, and we're gonna do it. We're doing it, right? So thank you for that. Along those lines, I want to uplift the book that Shannen wrote recently, because I think it really, I thought about it because subversive habits unearths the largely hidden history of Black Catholic sisters in the fight for racial, educational, and sexual justice in the United States. Although Black Catholics have routinely been characterized as politically complacent with white racism, Shannen Dee Williams appends that myth by recovering Black sisters' activism as pioneering Black religious leaders, educators, healthcare professionals, as segregation foot soldiers, Black power activists, and womanist theologians, drawing upon a diverse array of ignored sources, including previously sealed church records, newspapers, and oral histories. Williams demonstrates that the journey of Black Catholic sisters in the United States constitutes a formidable chapter in the history of the long African American struggle for freedom, justice, and human dignity. In offering the first historical survey of African American sisters, this book shifts attention to the U.S. Catholic Church as a stronghold of white supremacy and significant battleground of Black women and girls struggling against racism and sexism. In narrating Black sisters' untold stories, subversive habits also makes visible the African roots of U.S. Catholicism and illuminates the long-standing Catholic dimensions of African American women's resistance to white supremacy and patriarchy.
I just wanted to say as well, just to add on, so much of my work is grounded in my own understanding that the most dangerous weapon of white supremacy is its ability to erase the history of its violence and its victims. That the greatest privilege of whiteness is the presumption of innocence. When we talk about these series of papal bulls, we have to remember that they not only authorized European Catholic invasions of the Americas, but also of Africa, that it sanctioned the development of the transatlantic slave trade. That when we tell Black Catholic sister stories and we tell Black Catholic stories, we are forced to confront the fact that our church was never an innocent bystander in the history of white supremacy, in the histories of these brutal acts and systems of colonialism, of slavery and segregation, that we have to talk about them all as one, that we cannot talk about genocide against indigenous peoples without also talking about those indigenous people in Africa, and then the ways in which Native American removal and genocide made way for the development of slavery in the Americas. Our church was the first enslaver in the Americas. They built this. It's not 1619 in what becomes the United States. It's almost a century before. And so if we do not understand that Black history is Catholic history and that Catholic history is Black history, that there are two transatlantic stories of American Catholicism, one that begins in Europe and another one that's ongoing that begins in Africa or begins with African-descended people who are living in Europe, then we are missing a piece of this story that we cannot afford to miss. We are not innocent and have never been innocent. But when we think about violence, we only sort of think about that physical violence, but also thinking about the violence of what that looks like when we're not talking about, when we are erasing that history. That this systematic erasure of the history of Black Catholics and other Catholics of color is part and parcel of this system that continues to inflict lethal harm on the descendants of those who were colonized and enslaved. And so telling Black sister stories opens us and creates a new opportunity for us to begin to confront this history in a reparative way. So thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. This is what we needed. We need to talk about it because we're learning together, because we're analyzing together, and we need to be just saying it, just naming it, and it's okay because we're evolving and we're growing and we're going to do it better and we're going to do it right. I'm so happy to see Archbishop Wester, by the way, here. Thank you. Thank you. It's the work like his is critical for the advancement of justice in the world. So I want to uplift also a message that Father Brian Massingales offered to us during his acceptance speech in last year for the Teacher of Peace Award. He said, "The greatest threat to peace in our time, both nationally and even internationally, is the rise of white nationalism. White nationalism is the gravest threat to peace precisely because it is intersectional, threatening social stability and human flourishing on multiple levels and fronts. Its commitment to racist, political, and cultural supremacy is obvious, manifested in voter suppression laws, crusades against critical race theory, which most of its opponents have never read, and public vitriol. Father Brian continues, Pax Christi enters the justice struggle through a particular lens, namely, a deep concern for peace and a decisive no to violence. But these cannot be its exclusive focus if it is to not only accurately understand society, but also effectively engage it. To remain relevant and on the frontier as a Catholic movement of peacemaking with justice, you must be perceived as not only anti-war and pro-nonviolence, you must also make explicit linkages between peacemaking, racism, consumerism, and ecological justice, and you have to be LGBTQ inclusive. Very wise words from Father Brian Massengill, who is always really ahead of his times in his thinking. So I'd like to get some just comments about this quote. And maybe Christina, because we see here that it's named, right? Ecological justice is important, is critical. What are your thoughts on that and anything else you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, those are powerful words, and there's so much to comment on. The Pope's encyclical Laudato Si, which our movement is based on, one of my favorite quotes, and maybe perhaps some of you, is everything is connected. Yeah. And throughout the encyclical, Pope Francis talks about that the roots of the ecological crisis have to do with the violence, the sin in our heart. And later on in Brian Massengill's speech, he talks about that the systemic racism is a sickness of the soul that's being manifested in our infrastructures and how we relate to one another. So it's all connected. It's all connected. The climate crisis is going to be one of the major sources for instability and insecurity, both in our country and around the world. We can see it now. We can see what's happening with the fires, with the heat waves, and everything from the psychological stresses to the competition that's going to be based on natural resources. I think the gift of Pax Christi is the analysis, how it looks at the root of violence. So I think one challenge is how do we preempt so much of the war that can arise because of the climate crisis and connect the dots.
I guess I'd like to jump in there to continue the conversation, go back to something that Shannen said in pointing to the fact that violence is not just direct violence. In fact, it seems to me that nonviolence is the cross-cutting approach to all of the issues that are so intersectional, that whether we're talking about systemic or structural or racial or environmental or cultural or psychological and so on, nonviolence is the answer. And I think that we have a lot to learn about what violence looks like before we can really talk about nonviolence. And then just one other thought, which Kazu Haga, who is a nonviolence trainer who is just brilliant, talks about the difference between nonviolence, non-violence, and nonviolence as one word. And I love his image because he thinks about non-violence as just not being violent. So I'm sitting here and I'm not being violent, at least not too violent. And that would be non-violence. But the non-violence to which Pax Christi is committed is engaged, muscular, serious, deep, wide nonviolence that is all the way from a spirituality and a way of life to effective strategies for addressing all of the violences that affect communities across the world. And so I think I totally agree with what Brian said, with the only exception that nonviolence I don't think of as something separate that only addresses war, for example, or only addresses physical violence, but the violence of racism is perhaps the preeminent violence along with militarism and environmental destruction in our society. So how we think about nonviolence is really key.
Correct.
Is that better? Yes. Okay. Okay. Listening to Archbishop Wester last night when he talks about the roots of the nuclear weapon development, that was actually, of course, the roots were to maintain white supremacy, and so I think that there's also this presumption. This is maybe a little bit off the beaten path, but this presumption that people of color historically have not had a stake in what happens on that level, because we're concerned about justice on our own level, our day-to-day issues of racial justice, but that the bigger picture is that yes, we do have a stake, and yes, I think it's also true that you said that militarism continues to be a way of dominating, of white dominance. And so that's another iteration of racism.
And it's so clear, right, how it's systemic as well. We see how, and we have to talk about this because we live here and we pay taxes, and it affects us as well. The training that happens of military personnel in other countries, and now you can actually see it here very clearly. From the School of the Americas, and now, of course, we know about African, yet another way that the U.S. is going to intervene in different countries in the African region. So I don't even like to call it hyper-militarization, because there shouldn't be any militarization. Our approach to justice in order and communities of care should be completely different, right? And I think a lot of cities actually are trying to change those models. So, and I'm sure many of you are involved with those groups locally. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I would like to ask Lauren about her work with the anti-death penalty. I know that you've been involved with that, and you're just so young, and I'm always so excited to see what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you're a national organizer, and people are just so familiar with you and meet with you so often, and you're doing such a great job. So I would love to hear about this passion that you have of the work with anti-death penalty.
Sure, I can share a little bit about that, and I think my journey into anti-death penalty work also directly leads into my journey with Pax Christi and with nonviolence, so maybe just sharing a bit about that. But I first entered the anti-death penalty advocacy sphere when I was in college, and it was an issue that I think I knew about on a academic level. I could write a paper on it, give you stats about it, but I think it really led me to feel and know deeply, have a conviction that action needs to be done. I think if our government is willing to look at a person that's right across from them and decide that they are going to forcefully take away someone's life, if the government has the power and authority and the desire to do that and they go through with it, I think there's nothing else that they would stop at. And so I think it really is a microcosm of all of these other issues that are deeply embedded into the criminal legal system, into our communities in general. All of these different layers play into it. So yeah, I started my work on anti-death penalty advocacy in college, and I think I quickly learned that you can't organize on an issue without having these relationships that connect you to folks that are directly impacted and really are who should be carrying the work for that. And so I was connected with a couple folks that are on Ohio's death row, and we became friends, had conversation pretty much every day. And unfortunately, in 2017, one of the folks that I was connected with was the first person executed after Governor Kasich resumed executions in Ohio. And going through that, I can't even say that I went through that experience with him at all, but I think just being kind of like tangential to him as he was experiencing that opened my eyes beyond what I could have imagined, because I think it, once again, is an example of how the government has the power and capacity to sideline people and tuck individuals away so deeply and do carry out these atrocities without even making it public to the community and the folks that they're committing these injustices in the name of. And so really, I think, yeah, my work on the death penalty has showed me the importance of organizing, being connected to the community, building relationships, and having that be like absolutely central to any organizing and advocacy that we are doing. And also making sure to center voices of folks that are directly impacted, taking steps back when you can, and just, I think especially as a white person who's supporting a movement that largely impacts Black and brown folks, I think knowing that just making yourself accessible to wherever you're able to lead. And I think that is something that Pax Christi especially I would encourage us to continue working on also, especially white folks within Pax Christi, taking up the opportunity when we can to do the unglamorous jobs. I think it's easy to want to jump into doing the fun advocacy and activism work, but I think I would encourage the white folks in our movement especially to take a step back, do the hard groundwork of learning and building relationships, and yeah, make sure that you are filling the role that is appropriate for you.
Thank you, Lauren. That was great. Megan?
I'm going to go to the theology route. This country was built on the rock-solid horrors of genocide and slavery and racism. The first original sin was not a woman eating a piece of fruit in Genesis. It was Cain killing Abel. The first time the word is mentioned is Cain kills Abel. The original genocide, the original racism is killing your own kin. We describe ourselves as the children of God. We kill our own kin. Racism is built into everything in our society. It impacts every area of life: economics, healthcare, how you define your gender, spirituality, our churches, absolutely everything. The victims of racism are not necessarily race-based. It's not just black, white, or red, yellow, or brown, or any other color of the rainbow or whatever. Dorothy Day used to say, it's this filthy, rotten system. And the victims of racism are anyone who doesn't make it in the system and falls through the huge cracks, or Pax Christi especially has to decide to stand with the people who fall through the cracks and decide not to play with the system, to live an alternative life, which is what we call Christianity, to be the children of God based on the Gospels and the words of the prophets, that we stand with all the victims of since Cain and Abel that are what we would lump in the term poor, that it is good news to the poor. And the poor is anyone who dies slowly because of all of the problems of the filthy, rotten system, which even seep into our church as well. And that we have to align ourselves, all the justice issues impact life and death. It may be slow death or it may be a long death. The death penalty is the public acknowledgement of that. But Pax Christi needs to be known as the people who stand with the victims and stand with anyone who decides on a lifestyle of hope. In the Native American communities that I've been working with and in the First Nations around the world, they call it living a life that undoes the harm that you have done. Or in Latin America, they would say there are only three kinds of people in the world. They are the people who get crucified, the people who do the crucifying, and the people who watch. And we have to make sure, as members of Pax Christi, that we're not just watching, and we certainly are not doing it, but that we stand with the people who are being crucified, and that is active, not unharming people, undoing the harm we have done. That is the core of Christianity, let alone what the peace of Christ might be. And we have to start thinking, this is a universal problem. Racism is, every country has its own racism problems. All of Asia has huge race problems. Latin America, everyone has a race problem. And it comes from separation. It's very closely tied to nationalism. But what we need to look at is the universal understanding that if we call ourselves the children of God, then we begin by looking at how violence affects everyone, everywhere. The two Beatitudes that should, I think, hold us together. The first one is, blessed are the poor. They've got it already. It's in the present tense. We need to align ourselves with all the groups that are poor. They all experience racism in some form or way. But if we live with them in solidarity, if we study the scriptures with them and try to do justice with them, then maybe we'll be prophetic like the Prince of Peace and become the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, they're the children of God. It's all interwoven, but it's changing our mindset on who we're aligned with. There are a number of black people sitting here, a number of white people sitting here. But I don't declare myself as white, and perhaps you shouldn't declare yourself as black. My first child is black. My grandchildren are black. But who are we past those? And we're the children of God. And so we have to start looking past those boundaries to see where peace brings us.
I'm curious to see what the black people who are present have to say about that.
I think what you're saying is very important, and it reminds me of a saying about dreaming with your eyes open. So where we want to be is not where we're at, and we need to acknowledge that reality. I can no better or no easier see myself as not an African American. I'm sitting here. I mean, I am, and that's my reality. So I think, thank you. So I think, I'm affirming where we need to be, but we don't live in a culture, we don't live in a world at this time, and I'm going to say more about this maybe if I have an opportunity about where I think we're going, but that we can do that, and I need to acknowledge my reality. Okay, I'm an African American woman living and making my way through a world through a country, through a society, a culture, whatever you want to call it, that's fundamentally, biased against people who look like me. And so I need to acknowledge that. But I affirm where we want to go, with your vision. And that's...
I guess I also, just thinking about returning to Father Massengel's statement and his call to sort of understand why being anti-racist is so important, but to understand actually what anti-racism looks like. And for me, and I want to say that in regards to, it's not simply that we live in a nation or a culture that denies Black humanity and Black dignity. We live in a church that has done that historically and continues to do that historically. That the Catholic Church is not simply deeply implicated in the global project of anti-Blackness and white supremacy, that in the modern era, it set into place everything that we have to sort of deal with in this moment of colonization as we begin to sort of make reparation and reckon. We haven't even really started to reckon with the complicity but agency of our church in these crimes against humanity. The church said Black and brown lives did not matter when it passed those papal bulls and subjected people to centuries of profound violence, including sexual violence. Even when we have conversations about the sex abuse crisis as if it's a modern phenomenon, when those who were colonized and those who were enslaved kept going and documenting, just because we don't all know that history does not mean that those people did not speak to us in that moment and are not speaking to us now. So if we are indeed going to be an anti-racist church, we have to become a pro-reparations church. Not only calling upon nations who have benefited and continue to benefit from these histories, legacies, and colonization is an ongoing issue, as is enslavement, as is segregation, then we have to become pro-reparations. And that does not simply mean making apologies. It does also mean cutting checks. Yes. It also means mandating the teaching of Black and Black Catholic history written by Black Catholics and Black people themselves who have told their stories. People continue to tell their stories and they have not been listened to. And so that in itself is where we have to begin. And let me say this too. If indeed by some miracle that we need to perform, Black and brown people and all of those who have been harmed and whose ancestors have been harmed, if they decide to distance themselves from the church and whomever, they also have that right to do so. Because the moral compass of our church with regards to racism and in everything connected, and that means everything, has never resided in white Catholic communities. We have to understand that and say that directly. It has not been there. When we look at how we have moved, it has been those who have been on the margins who have moved us and called us to move and who are still calling us to move. And so for me, I think as a Catholic, a cradle Catholic, who up until 15 years ago did not know that Black nuns existed, how was that even possible in my church? I am the daughter of the first Black woman to graduate from the University of Notre Dame. My mother was educated by nuns, not Black nuns, who never taught their charges Black history or anything of the sort. People who have been harmed have a right to protect themselves, but they also require reparations, and we need to get serious about reparations, and whatever comes from that also has to be understood as the work of God.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you. And as you, yes. And this didn't just happen and went away, of course. As you know, it's happening now and it's been exported. How much money is being sent right now to Israel? What happened yesterday? Gaza was bombed, 10 people dead. This is what we're dealing with. This is being replicated. That's why we need to get to the root of it. We need to address it. We need to point at it. And we need to name it. And I really want us to change the narrative about the we. Why are we identifying as part of this nation in a way, this settler colonial state? Let's identify with people who share our values. Let's think about and reflect about how a lot of the things that we've learned when we were young, we've been indoctrinated. You were reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, you were singing the national anthem, and then you feel like butterflies when you sing it and feel very patriotic. You've been taught to do that. But what are you aligning with when you do that? Empire. I'm sorry, it has to be said. And we can do this work together. And I know all of you are already there. I know many of you already, yes, this is what we're doing. This is what we're preaching. And let's remember Jesus was not white. Who was he murdered by? The Roman Empire. And now our Pope is in Rome. But, let's work on that. So let's think about history and let's think about how it's affecting our understanding of the world, of society, of how we relate to each other. The concept of family, mom, dad, and children, really? It's much bigger than that. We're a community, we're a family. It takes so much more for a person to be formed, develop, feel loved. It truly takes a village. So, would you like to?
Well, yeah, and I also like to say that just to restate and emphasize that when we talk about racism, we talk about injustices and all that, these are not phenomena that just happen naturally. These were from the beginning, intentional policies, practices that were put in place, but it didn't come from something natural. And I think sometimes we talk about these things in a passive voice. Well, it just happened. It was baked in. No, there were very specific things that happened that are documented, and we need to acknowledge that. And at the same time, what we do now, we need to be very intentional about undoing all of this stuff. And as much as the intention was given in the beginning. So I just wanted to restate that in a different way, that it's not racism, white supremacy didn't just happen because whites are superior, or because it just happens because God made the races different, and this natural evolution. Didn't happen that way. There were intentional things that took place with the intent of benefiting some people, not a lot of people, by the way. And that's the other thing what Megan was, I think that, only a small group of people, a subset of people. Yeah. So we need to, keep that in our mind. Thank you.
I work with the First Nations and Indigenous communities. All of racism happened first before anybody else got here. And we have not dealt with the fact of any of the Native American communities, of which 90% are Catholic. They experience slavery, they still experience slavery. And that we have to keep in mind that that structure of racism was extended when other people came from other countries, when black racism started. But we can't just concentrate on one particular group. It's already happening with an Asian community. In many parts of the United States, the Latino communities are struggling with it. It's anybody who's not white, but not white connected to the dominant culture, language, religion, economics, etc. And that we have to think of that in terms of that. We know nothing about anything that has gone on with the First Nations in the United States. Deb Haaland, who is the first Native Secretary of State, she has just released a map and a list of 473 burial sites and schools where all of the Native Americans were killed and buried. Those schools stopped in as late as 1980 and 1990. All of those reservations were the setup for slavery. And we can, again, within the problem is sometimes the answer. The First Nations have much to teach us about how to deal with the earth and the land, but they also are trying to teach us a great deal about how to deal with slavery and reparations. They've been at it a lot longer, and they have more history and more to share, and yet we don't deal with them much at all. So I'm just saying we have to think more globally and more on a humane basis, that this is a major problem for the majority of the human race. let alone the majority of the United States. The people in control, the dominating group, happens to be white right now. But who knows? In other places, it's all different colors. So we have to start looking at who are the real victims of racism. They're everyone who is not us, not like us, and don't look like us or act like us, and our traditions are different.
Just to pick up on that, in terms of the environmental and climate crisis, of course, when we look at who is disproportionately affected, it is people of color, it is communities in the global south. And so we have to ask ourselves, what are going to be, as you mentioned, the solutions? And Pope Francis names again and again, can we draw on the wisdom of those who have been caring and living in communion with the land centuries ago and up until today, which are the Native communities? So what wisdom can we look at? But I just want to name that with the climate crisis, there's a new term called environmental violence that some Indigenous scholars are lifting up that's looking at how so many extractive industries are coming into Native communities, and the impact is not only destruction of the land, but destruction of women's bodies, of children's futures. There's an increase of women's violence in areas like this. So just to lift up, again, just the interconnectedness of racism, of violence, of environmental destruction. And so when I look at Pax Christi, like how can you lift up this analysis of the systemic issues? And I just want to name that as I was here, I was thinking about what was my relationship with Pax Christi. And in 2005, I was at the Nevada Desert Experience when Pax Christi and the Nevada Desert Experience came together to give witness. And one of my claims to fame was that I got arrested with Martin Sheen, so I was very excited. But at that time, I had just finished my theology degree, and as a young woman searching for embodied expressions of what it means to be Catholic and have a commitment to justice, and there were few spaces for that. So to be able to show up in the Nevada desert, to sing and pray and go on pilgrimage and get arrested, and to feel those, feel in my own body that, like, this is what it means to be Christian, to have this actual experience, like, that was formative. So my hope and prayer is that for Pax Christi, that you continue to create those experiences to make it real, what it means to be Catholic. Because as you know, I have a hard time going to Mass because I'm trying to connect the dots. But for me to be in the desert, that was prayer, that was liturgy. So can we create more opportunities for that kind of concrete witness to, as you mentioned, to live and to act like Jesus in these embodied ways? So.
The one thing that I'm a historian, and so one thing that always stands out to me is this idea that we haven't known these things, which in itself is a form of violence. It means that we haven't been listening to people who have been telling us things for quite some time. As we call upon ourselves in this moment of great global crisis to sort of look to the wisdom of Indigenous peoples wherever they reside around the world, or look at the wisdom of marginalized people, it's going to be important for us to remember that when we think about this wisdom, nothing is new under the sun, in the sense that people have been telling us these things for decades, sometimes centuries, and that knowledge has been derided as, and I'm going to use the horrific, well, I'm not going to use the word, but the language of the church in calling these people as non-humans, or as HEATHEN, or SAVAGE, right? That these knowledge and these knowledge systems have been denigrated by those proponents of white supremacy, those who make claims sort of white supremacy, maybe through their words, but even more so through their actions. And so when we call upon ourselves in this contemporary moment to begin to make reparations for the brutal histories and ongoing legacies of colonialism, slavery, and segregation, we must also recognize the ways in which our church is still very much a part of the contemporary movement for white supremacy, the ways in which our church is funding certain organizations, looking at the voting patterns of white Catholics in particular, and to sort of see that, well, if Black and brown Catholics are not voting in that same way, then they certainly have an understanding of what we believe when we say that all lives matter and that every life has dignity and value, that there is something within these communities that has been marginalized, that has been disrespected, that has been turned away. And so now if we are going to look and seek out the expertise of these individuals, we're also going to have to confront the harm that has been caused, that you can't go and then take that knowledge and then say we're all one and together. We talk a lot about forgiveness, but very less about reparation, that we don't get to reconciliation without confronting the truth, apologizing for crimes against humanity, and then making reparation, transformative reparations for people. And then we get to a place of reconciliation, but also think about what reconciliation might look like, because I'm not sure that we truly understand what reconciliation might look like that is healthy for those who have been victimized. So I just wanted to affirm that, but also saying historians, communities of color have been saying these for a very long time. And I just say this, and I'm just gonna say this and I'm gonna stop. Again, I just wrote the first book on Black Catholic nuns who've been here almost 200 years. It is the first historical survey of Black Catholic nuns. It is taken until 2022. That in itself is obscene. And we need to call that what that is. They left us the records. No one cared enough to ask and include. And so that in itself has to tell us that before we even sort of say who is going to do what and what not, there are a lot of apologies. There's a lot of reparation that needs to be made. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. And really, that's the reason why we need to support this type of work. And I really invite you to buy that book and read it very intentionally, analyze it, and apply it to your daily life, to how you see the world. That's important to me.
Just picking up on that, and thank you for the brilliance of this conversation. It occurs to me that at a very, very fundamental level, it's all about relationships. It's about learning how to have relationships of respect, not power over relationships. And I think that relates to how we interact with the earth and with every person and every creature on the planet. And I think that at a very fundamental level, that is what nonviolence is about. And so I feel like Pax Christi Pax Christi USA needs to keep on keeping on, learning, listening, sometimes being quiet, sometimes just learning how to listen, but building right relationships. And I think that one of the gifts of this time is that we can't say we didn't know. We just can't say that anymore, ever. So right relationships across the board with the planet and with each other seems to me to be the thread that ties this together.
And with this beautiful message, we're going to close this conversation right on time. Right, Johnny? Yes. And so another applause, please, for our guests. And I'm going to invite
Thank you. I stand in gratitude for all that was shared and held this morning. And because so much wisdom and shared experience and new experience and this new experience of being together at a Pax Christi conference for the first time in a while with such a distinguished panel, I'd love to just take a moment and to pause. There's been so much sharing and so much deep listening. And so if I could just invite us to come back to our bodies for a moment, perhaps put your feet on the floor. If it feels comfortable to close your eyes. Let's connect with our breath. If it feels comfortable to put your hands on your heart center. And let us communally savor this moment. The things that resonated with us, the things that challenged, excited, ignited. And let's take a communal breath in, breathing in presence, and breathing out peace. And you can let your eyes slowly open when you are ready. Thank you. So from the very heart, head, action-centered, I'm afraid I'm going to have to pull us back to the very logistical-centered. So please bear with me for a moment. So your workshops for this morning and this afternoon are identified on your name tags. If you filled out the survey online in your registration, we did our best to find that record and print it on your name tag, because I know for myself, when I go to a conference, I show up and I say, which one did I sign up for? So if it helps as a reminder, that's wonderful. You might have picked up, hopefully you did, we have some extras outside, I see, right by the registration table, this handout. And so we assigned workshop rooms after the actual program booklet was printed. So you'll want to take this, because this is the most updated room list. I see some people holding it right now. If you want to get visual confirmation that you have it right now, that's great. And there's also some on the way out. So your workshop rooms for the morning, there are some on this floor, and it's marked on the form which ones are on the first floor, and then which ones you'll have to take the elevator up to the 14th floor after you exit this door here. For the North Tower, yes. Thanks, Johnny. Yes, the workshop rooms for the 14th floor are the North Tower, not the South Tower. So our workshops will start this morning at 11:15. They'll run until 12:45, and then will be followed by lunch. At lunch, we will have some book signings here in this room. We will have tables set up for each of our authors, including Art Laffin, Marie Dennis, Dr. Shannen Dee Williams, McKenna. So please make sure and stop by their tables. Another note on workshops. If you are registered for the Getting to the Root workshop on the Doctrine of Discovery, I'm just going to remind you that we had sent out 2 videos earlier this week. So if you're planning on going to that workshop, you can use your break right now to refresh yourself, get some snacks, and then if you'd like to watch those videos, please do. And they were sent out to everybody. So if you aren't registered for that workshop, you can still watch them sometime. Please note that we will not meet in this room again until the banquet this evening. So please pay attention to your schedules in the program booklet for workshops, and they're happening this afternoon and other events between now and then. And because we won't be meeting in this room until the banquet, I have a few banquet announcements. If your plans have changed and you're no longer coming to the banquet, please give the blue ticket that was in your name tag to one of our staff. That would be very helpful. Don't forget to visit our exhibitors during the breaks, over lunch, and this afternoon, and right up to our banquet tonight. I'd like to call attention to 2 exhibitors that are with us. One group is only with us today, and they are the social justice team of St. Anne's of Baltimore. And I see Ralph, Dolores, and Mary are right here. Would you mind standing? Thank you. Ralph, Dolores, and Mary, when you walk into the exhibitors room, they're right in the front. You can't miss them. And I'd like to highlight them because, once again, they're here for today, and their parish has started a letter writing campaign to advance the causes of canonization of Venerable Pierre Toussaint, Mother Mary Lang, Julia Greeley, Thea Bowman, Venerable Augustus Tolton, and Henriette DeLille. And so please, we encourage you to visit their table. And then secondly, the Friends of the Third World and Pax Christi USA table, you can get your Pax Christi USA shirts available in adult and youth sizes. So it's great for grandchildren and children. Okay, I'm nearing the end, I promise. Right, so we got break now until 11:15. You can have a make your own trail mix snack on your way out and hopefully arrive to your workshops a couple of minutes early. Raffle tickets are going to be on sale at lunch and at dinner. And any national council members who came up to me within the last 24 hours and said, "Put me to work, Michelle," can you raise your hands? Great. Anybody else who would like to help out within the next 20 minutes? I need about 10 volunteers, so just meet me right up here. Thanks, national council members, and thank you.